Hey, my name is Will Barron, and welcome to this week's live stream where we're going to be reviewing some of the photos that you've left in the Photography Explained Photo Review Club Facebook group. And I'll throw the Facebook group on screen right now. If you're not a member of the group, well, it's free. If you want to go in there, post some photos, and we will review them. And there we have some inception of me, probably 10 seconds behind as I scroll through here. So a bunch of photos. You see lots of people leaving lots of lovely reviews. And yeah, hopefully that will be of use to any photographers out there who want to improve their photography. So we're going to run through some of the photos over the past week that have been put into the group. And I will just double check that we're live on all the platforms, which we seem to be, which is good. And something that I'll just show you very quickly before we jump into the photos, and that is the growth of the Facebook group, which I think is kind of cool. I've never really run a Facebook group like this before. So we launched kind of less than 2 months ago. 50, 60 posts and comments a day. And here we can see a high of 1,200 people viewing the group in a day. And you can see this growing up and up and up. So hopefully this continues. And yeah, thank you for everyone who leaves comments in the groups. It leaves comments on photos in the group. And yeah, let's jump in and review some of the photos within there. So this is a lovely photo from the main man, Dan. What feedback do we have? Immediately, there is this dark rock here, so my eye gets drawn around and my eye goes straight out of the image, straight out over to the left, and there's just nothing here. So this image is a candidate for a crop. I just pull this into Photoshop for a second. Let's take a look. I feel like this edge here could just be immediately removed. So maybe something more like that. If we wanted a obvious crop, what I think potentially, if we had a kind of a 4:3 that way, it might be more interesting. Nope, we were right the first time around. The problem with this now is we've got the leading line or this curve of these rocks going to this person in the kayak, one or the other. The issue is that they're now sailing, floating out of the scene. So yeah, maybe a crop more like that is going to be more of a winner for us. If we don't want to use generative fill, we'll pull it up like that. It's kind of a bit obvious. We're using the rule of thirds here to align the person in the boat/kayak. And again, maybe we do want a little bit more room on that side. That's probably still fair. But I think this then starts to cut down on all that space in the top corner where I feel like my eye might kind of bounce around a little bit more and come back to see what's going on. What we should do really is just, if you wanted to, I'd cut this out, I'd reverse it and have him float in that direction. And that would probably lead to an image where we get stuck into it a little bit more, which typically I consider a good image. If we look at a photo and our eyes get stuck within it, that to me is a photo that is worth has been worth the time of kind of getting stuck into. Okay, so here we have Kev. I wonder where this is. This is a nice beach. Cool. So yes, as Alandro says here, you've got crap all over your sensor in the top left-hand side of things, and also in the top right-hand side of things. I'll show you Kev and anyone watching who is unsure of how to get rid of this in a second, or how to spot it. I'll show you how to spot it a bit easier in a second. But I think the main issue is you've got all these rocks pointing in this direction, but then there's nothing over here for the rocks to guide our eyes to. It's a cool beach, obviously great sunset. I think you've perhaps overblown it on the contrast here, on the saturation, and we've blown out the highlights in the top part of the image, which could all be just pulled back down and made more subtle. You probably tried to go a bit over this. But it's the composition, the issue. So let me pull this into Photoshop. We'll see if there's a composition in there, but I think it's probably where you were stood, which is the main issue here, more so than anything else. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to open Camera Raw, or we'd open the raw file in Lightroom in the first instance. We're going to go to the Remove tool. We're going to go to Visualize Spots. And here you can see dust. And obviously we're using a JPEG that's been compressed. it's been uploaded to Facebook. These spots would be really obvious using this visualize spots tool if you wanted to get rid of all this crap. They're so obvious that you could just find them in the image regardless. And I will burn some time as we use this remove AI tool, remove generative AI. I'm sure they keep changing the text on some of these labels just subtly. I feel like I have muscle memory of what they're called, and they're always slightly off. Either that, or with a 6-month-old baby in the house, my brain is like mud. Could be one or both of those options, not mutually exclusive. Cool. So we'll wait for this to work, and then we'll see, because I feel like there might be a composition on this left-hand side with a bit of a crop that is stronger than this rock here is just too much. There's a gap. There's just too much on this side over here. So I feel like, though, there might be like an image here. Something more on the lines of that. And in reality, maybe even get a bit closer so that obviously cutting these rocks off on the frame down here is not ideal. So if you would have stood here in that gap and just had these going out, that probably, I don't think we've got enough megapixels to kind of put something more like that. Something more like that. Let's have another look. But yeah, you get the point. We would have these rocks going out. If you remove, we try and remove some of this? This may not work. It might be a bit too much for Photoshop. So we're getting there. So I feel like we're getting to a more pleasing composition here. Obviously, we're running out of megapixels because we've cropped an image that has already been destroyed by an upload to Facebook. But we probably want to reduce the saturation. Maybe not. Maybe just the vibrance. Just pull it down slightly, and then the color temperature is probably way off. That's probably looking more like that from a color temperature perspective. Maybe a bit of a vignette just to drag the eye down to the middle of the frame rather than have it escape the top and the bottom. So I'll create a mask, I'll invert the mask, I'll reduce the exposure up there. And then what we're definitely going to do is create another mask. We'll do a linear gradient and just remove this bit of light up here. Which we're going to struggle to do because it's so blown out, these highlights, that we're going to struggle. But you can imagine with the raw file, we can pull that back down. So that's the image I'd want to be creating from the original source material of this. So yeah, cool. I should mention, because it seemed to be at the end of each one of these live streams that we have a bunch of people commenting at the end of the video, that if you leave a message, if you want to chat with me, you certainly can. I'll just put this camera up slightly. And yeah, if you drop a message, if you've got any feedback, if you think I'm doing things completely wrong, do let me know, and I'll show you a message on the screen. We can have a chat about it. But yeah, Kev, that's what I'd be throwing up, mate. Something more like that. If you ever wanted to send the raw file over, I would certainly take a look at that image because the conditions are pretty epic there. But there we have it. Okay, let's move on to the next image. Here we have Sue. Here we have Sue. It says, hi. Yesterday got away with me before I had a chance to post this. Here is the photo that caused the massive accidental meltdown. At a glance, I can tell why. There was so much wrong with it. It looked okay in the EVF and the preview. The focus is soft. Yeah, you've missed focus. It looks like you've shot it. Maybe you shot this through a window, potentially. You shot it on a Z9 as well, which is a shame. So you've mentioned here, Sue, someone suggested that there's diffraction from the small aperture making the focus soft. No, this is not in focus. It almost looks like there's something in the foreground of the frame here, which is quite close, that is just battered the image here. ISO 6400 is absolutely fine on the Z9, not an issue. So yeah, which is a real shame. 'Cause this is a really beautiful, like that second fox in the background with this fox's face in the foreground. Sorry, Sue, you've kind of screwed this one up. I'm sure there'll be other opportunities. But yeah, I think I'd perhaps crop it, get rid of all this dead space on the side here. That doesn't need to be there. If this is a wall or a ledge, then we can straighten the image because the horizon is way off. It just seems to be weird out of focus in the background here. I refuse to use the word, I'll use it once now, but bokeh. I refuse to use that word. But the out of focus area in the background all looks a bit odd. So yeah, I don't know if it looks like what it looks like is you've shot it through a glass window that has had like some kind of privacy frosting on it or something, which is a real shame. But you've obviously got an eye for the shot. You saw the two foxes. Just keep chipping away at them, especially if this is local, and you can do this again. But it's such a shame because that fox in the background, that's such a lovely picture. So you go, Sue. It's a bit of feedback for you, and hopefully next time, well, do post again when you get something a little bit more in focus and sharp with a pose like this, because you're like milliseconds off or one or two button presses away from an absolute banger here, which is unfortunate, but sometimes how it goes. Okay, here we have Jables. I'll just throw it in Photoshop because I think there's one obvious thing here that we've also seen on a couple of the other photos thus far. And that is either your horizon is wonky or the lamp is wonky. But with a graphic image like this, I think if we just straighten the horizon the best we can, it's almost like a bit of distortion there as well. But so like immediately that is way stronger of an image because the horizon has been fixed. And so our eye looks at it and doesn't think there's an issue, basically. So with graphic, bold images like this with lots of character, that is the first thing. If the straight lines, they need to be straight. I'm not sure about all this space on the far side. I think it becomes a less dynamic image, perhaps, if it is centered. But again, with a bold image like this, I'd probably get rid of that extra bit of space on the side, because it's not like it's the first image that we covered where it's a boat going in a direction, in which case we want to leave some space. But yeah, other than that, I mean, you've got a strong series of tones in the image. You could probably crush the blacks a little bit further. Again, that'll make it a bit bolder. So we'll just look at moving the black point down. So make the black elements of it actually black. This might not translate very well as it's been streamed, but on my screen that looks stronger. And yeah, cool image. I'm pretty rubbish at seeing images like this. Obviously, they're all around us, and someone who's decent at photography can just have a wander around and find interesting shapes. And this is an interesting shape of a very common, uninteresting object of a lamp on a wall. So yeah, good job. Okay, so what do we have next? Cool. This is not dissimilar to the first image. I think your name is Joachim. And the problem you've got up here is just this big, bold space where my eye immediately goes to this little island and then straight out. You've obviously done this in a stylized way, which is fine. Stu McGlennon, my photography coach, his mate as well, but photography coach, he said something really, which I found really, this might just be me being sad, but I found it really profound the other day. We were talking about edited photo, and he was going through one of my edits with me, and I tried to stylize it a little bit like this. And what he said to me was that The problem with stylizing images is if you want to get anywhere with photography, you then build this style and you've got to continue doing it. And not every image is going to fit a specific stylized color palette like what you have in this image here. So what he suggested, which immediately I was like, okay, this is so smart, was if you edit your photos so they look like what you saw in real life, and then maybe you tweak them and you obviously can make them slightly more epic if that's the style that you want to go for, versus like excuse me, versus more like a documentary style. You can pull things, you can tweak things, you can embrace the art of making these landscape shots epic. But if it starts off from a color perspective, pretty similar to what it was in reality, that means that you can take shots of anything and they'll all fit in your portfolio. So that's something to consider if this is something you're doing very purposely. But the main issue is this big patch of openness here. And the only way you're going to fix that is, especially in a location like this that doesn't have mountains, for example, in the background, a big sodding mountain in the background would be perfect here. Without that, you need epic weather, and a little bit of cloud here, nothing in the sky is the issue. The other thing you can do is thinking about cropping it, because you've got some half decent color here, and just focus on the mist coming off the lake and this little island. So a nice crop, but for this more grand scene, yeah, you need something up here. The moon, the sun, anything. Some clouds, some just epic light bouncing down, obviously. Some epic light coming from up here turns this from a nice shot, pretty nice shot, into an absolute banger. So there we go. Okay, a rat on a pole. This is nice. I think because you might have added a vignette here already. This might have been a relatively bright part of the image. I think you could probably go similar to what I was saying before. The colors in this are pretty accurate, I would imagine, and so you've got an opportunity here just to push the contrast in a little bit stronger with a vignette. Now I'm gonna have to push and move this around a little bit because the subject is quite high up in the frame up here. But yeah, if I invert that, depends whether you want it to look real. That looks a bit off there, I think. So maybe it's more kind of along those lines. Maybe that's a bit strong still. Again, it depends if you want it to go a little bit overboard with this. You could probably pull out a bit more color from your subject as well. Those purples are a little bit kind of muted there. So now just make it a little pop a little bit more. A little bit of clarity just sharpens, because we want our eye. We almost want. I don't think it's going to do it because there isn't a clear foreground here, but we almost want a little bit of depth of field blurriness at this bottom part of the image down here. We'll try the lens blur, but it can be a bit hit or miss when there's not obvious layers to an image. I know it's done it. It's like a subtle amount. Again, just to suck our eye up towards the subject up there. So that's what I'd be looking at doing. Again, this is somewhat subjective. So that's my version of it. The other alternative is I definitely think a bit of clarity or sharpening on the subject there, just so, because there's loads of detail in that part of the image, just so my eye hits it and it kind of gets stuck. But yeah, the only other way of looking at it is if you removed this vignette that is on the image and it's all very flat, it would then look very bold and kind of post. And so that could be a way of going about doing it as well. But no, cool image. I appreciate you posting it. Okay, I saw this in the Facebook group when it was posted, and it's got a bunch of comments on here and a bunch of likes. So congrats, Jamie. It's a nice image. So I say this every week, I'm certainly no wildlife photographer. Maybe there's a bit too much space at the top. Again, this is somewhat stylized. I think this has been almost like color graded. It looks quite cinematic, which is a style, and it almost looks like there's been like some kind of grain added to it as well. It looks like it's been reprocessed to look like it's been shot on film. Here we have some high quality feedback from Snowlights there. I appreciate you tuning in, mate, and commenting. But yeah, it's a lovely photo. You've got perfect focus on the eye, depth, out of focus on here. The beak's just going out of focus. Puffin, we're in a field. That looks like some kind of crop. That makes it interesting as well. And the only issue for me, if I'm being hypercritical, I would love a shot like this. If I took a shot like this, I would be absolutely made up with it. But there's just this big patch at the top here, maybe a vignette around that, just so my eye doesn't get sucked away from the bird out of the frame. Let's just try that. Let's just try it while we're here. So don't know if a crop is really what's needed. As I said, it could just be a bit of a vignette at the where are we? Filter, camera raw. Could we increase exposure? Wanted to increase exposure to make the vignette more obvious. And I do appreciate that 30% of my feedback on these images is add a vignette, which, yeah, that to me just knocks off the top of the image and makes me not kind of lose, makes me not want to jump out of the frame. This makes me want to stick to the bird's eye here, and then I'm pondering at what are they looking at. Are they trying to get some of? Are they looking for some lunch? That's probably more accurate to what it was shot at, but I'd probably cool that off slightly. But yeah, that's what I would do. But completely subjective at this point. Beautiful image, and I again appreciate you posting it. It's a nice image to see. Cool. Let's jump on. Okay, so I saw this image as well. Lee Laney, you have posted a bunch of images and given a bunch of feedback. So I appreciate you being a key part of the Photography Explained community. This is a class photo. What did you write, Lee Laney? Is this perfect? Nope. It'd be interesting to see why you would consider this nothing's perfect. Obviously, we can always improve things, but is there anything that you have spotted? I'm mobility challenged, so my only option is to take it inside a vehicle. Glad I got approaching focus. Tripod was an option. I think you've done a great job here. Constructive criticism is still welcome. I don't think I have much feedback for this. Again, you could very easily. You've got a dust spot up here. Okay, let's take a look at this. If my only criticism is a dust spot, then for what it's worth, you've done a cracking job. So again, put it into camera raw filter, visualize spots, and there's the dust spot all the way over there. Maybe there's some more there as well. No, they're clouds. So yeah, get rid of this dust spot there. Other than that, this part of the image is quite dark. You've got a bit of, maybe this is a natural vignette. It depends on the lens you've used, right? If we were being hypercritical, this side of the image is slightly darker than this side of the image. This cloud here, the more I look at it, is slightly distracting. But no, you probably got a bit more room on it. If you look at the your histogram up here, you've probably got a bunch of room here if you really wanted to stretch out that histogram and add more contrast. But then, are you reducing how realistic the image looks at that point? Probably. I mean, to my taste, that little bit more contrast just helps the image pop and look a bit stronger. So that's before and after. Other than that, got beautiful colors. You've got complementary colors with the blues and the reds and the oranges. You got this person here. What's their expression? They actually they may not be, but they look like they're looking straight at you, which is cool. It's just a cool shot. So yeah, double check for dust spots. We all have crap on our lenses. It is what it is. Maybe a few bits up there as well. But no, I'd add a bit more contrast, but I think you've done a wonderful job there. And yeah, you should be really proud of that photo. It's cool. Composition is lovely as well. All right. What do we have next? This is a weird photo from Jimmy, J-Y-M-Y. Let's have a look. Cool. It's very filmic, cinematic, one might say. I'm not sure on this highlight here being completely blown out because you've got all these strands of these little god rays. So maybe the sun is about here, just trickling over these trees. I think if you are filming a film, this look, and there's just been, because I love the person there, and there's just been some kind of nuclear explosion, fantastic. But for an image that I want to get stuck into and really see things, again, this might be like a stylistic choice, but I'd rather have a little bit more detail here and then soften it with some negative dehaze perhaps in Lightroom to make it gentle. But this is just like blown out of all proportions. So that's what I don't think about that. I think you've done well. I like the person being slightly off here. It makes the composition look a little bit uncomfortable. You got a straight horizon, which is good. I would get rid of this tree here. Just use the clone tool or the AI removal tool to get rid of that, because I love these trees coming in from the side. And you got these other trees, taller and stronger in the frame, leading our eye towards the character there. The character is interesting in and of itself. I don't know, the way that they are stood, their kind of posture. I assume that they look like they're facing towards the light where the nuclear weapon has just got off. It's cool. The clouds are nice and soft. And again, this is obviously a stylistic choice on the color. But cool image. I'd get rid of this at the bottom. This is really distracting at the bottom. It's too bright. Either darken it off, just do a radial gradient and remove the lights or reduce the exposure. This is fine. Maybe I'd darken the highlights on this branch here. But other than that, these trees coming in, person there. I appreciate the sky up here is a stylistic choice. But I would want to see a little bit more detail there, even if it is a soft, gentle light protruding out. I just feel like there's a big chunk of the frame where I'm just hoping to see something, and I don't see nothing. But cool photo. I like it. Okay, here we have a photo from Tez. We've got some feedback from Roy here. I would darken the shadows and blacks and dehaze a little, nudge the contrast a little higher. I don't know about contrast. I think what you've done here is overcooked it, because there's no way, I shouldn't say no way, it's very unlikely that this grass here is blood red in reality. So you probably want to shift your color balance, reduce some of the saturation. The highlights are blown here. If you've got the raw file, maybe we can pull the highlights back just to add a little bit more detail there. Compositionally, it's fine. It's not a banger, but it's a lovely shot, and you've got the lovely mist on the ground here, the fog on the ground. This probably comes down to whether you were just walking along, got your camera out, took a picture, or if you're out for a proper shoot, if you had a longer lens, there are probably layers within this fog here with a little bit of sky, probably where this bunch of trees are on the horizon. That's probably a long lens shot. And when you take a long lens shot there, I know people talk about lens compression. Obviously, nothing is really being compressed. You're just cropping the image to that specific point. But because you're cropping into the distance, those layers seem like they're closer together because you've not got the foreground elements too stretched apart. And so that's probably a stronger composition around there. Even this bit with a bit of foreground. So yeah, I think you've overdone it from a color perspective. But other than that, if you had a longer lens, shooting a little bit further in and getting rid of it, because it's just a field, right? Or a bit of farmland. It's not that interesting. There seems to be some weird color shifts going on in the bottom part of the image as well. I'm not sure what's going on there, but you could fix that with Lightroom pretty easily. But yeah, that's cool photo. Great conditions, absolutely. Okay, where we have from Paul Roberts, we have a street photo. You don't have any comments? I will give you a comment. I'll give you a like, and I'll give you a video comment. Garage roof closed and some people on top of a garage roof. And tons of noise / grain. I think the main thing I would change in this is it's really frustrating to see this text cropped off at the bottom, because you need the text, because the garage roof closed gives us a story, which is what we've talked episodes of this photo review club like live stream. If you can get a story into an image, immediately it elevates the image, in my eyes anyway. So you've got a story. I think you probably, let me just throw this into Lightroom for a second, or Photoshop. I find that sometimes images like this that are almost like a scene, well, cinematic is the word, right? Probably overused, overemphasized. But even just put it in like a 16:9 kind of crop can we get rid of some of that text as well? That to me now looks more like a scene from a film. You've probably got a bit of latitude to increase exposure here slightly. Again, depends if maybe you don't want to, because maybe you want these to be silhouetted, in which case maybe I'd silhouette them whilst I'll just do this very, very quickly and not accurately, but maybe I'd want to just slightly increase the sign here. Maybe just slight increase of exposure overall. So we might have to, just to give that bit of contrast. That's probably how I would do the shot. So the 16:9, so it looks more like cinematic, kind of filmic. You don't need the people are, well, hopefully it's not like your family or friends as I say this, but they're probably not all that interesting as individuals in the scene itself. And so silhouetted, they're probably more interesting. Silhouetted leads to a little bit more mystery around the image, and then just brighten up that garage roof closed so we can see it and get rid of that text at the bottom. Yeah. Maybe there's an element of color here. We can probably, as I look at it a bit longer, probably a more neutral kind of color. But again, it depends. It depends on the look you're going for. That to me is now almost completely desaturated, and again looks like a still from a black and white film. And got tons of grain here. I wouldn't remove the grain. I think the grain adds to the kind of filmic effect of it. But yeah, you've done a great job. This long-winded way of saying, I think you've done a great job of getting some people. There's a sign here that tells a story. Why are they up there? This is obviously a permanent sign, and so they shouldn't be up there. It's not like they've put the sign up and then to close it off to go and have a picnic or something up there. There's these bottles of Coke, which adds this sounds really fancy as I say this, but a contemporary element to this. This isn't 100 years ago. Those Coke bottles mean it's probably this week, this month. And the lady, I think it's a lady, is wearing a hoodie. So that kind of times it, gives it a contemporary feel as well. But no, cool photo. I like it. Just those few tweaks is what I'd be thinking about to double down and just improve it even further. Okay, here we have Jeffrey. Nice. Some ducks. They're all going in the right line. They've all got their wings open. I think maybe you've got a lot of exposure to go here. The faces are quite dark. I'd probably raise the exposure a little bit. I'm working on a calibrated monitor here. You might not be. And so some of these things, it's easier to see when you're in a room with a calibrated monitor that's somewhat controlled from a lighting perspective. Less controlled with this big light next to me lighting the video for you guys. But yeah, I'd probably increase the exposure and nothing you can do as you're taking the shot, but obviously some clouds or some light or something more interesting in the background would add to it as well. But you could easily print this off, have this on the wall as a kind of a bold shot. But yeah, increase the exposure, pull out some more color in the image potentially as well. So not saturation across the entire image, but more selectively, because I'm pretty sure these ducks, their heads are more of a greeny tone, and you're kind of losing that there. Yeah, cool photo. Cool. Here we have Andre. I like the composition. I immediately come in from the bottom of the frame, this light couple of twigs. My eye goes up the shadow, across the tree, up and over. You got nice colors. Maybe in a few weeks, well, whenever you took this shot, a few days or a week after this, when these leaves have changed color again, you'd kind of elevate this shot. Obviously, a bit of mist, like any woodland kind of waterish shot like this, would do great. The only things I would consider are, other than the conditions on the day, which you're less in control of, but perhaps shooting this a few days later, a week later, I would also consider using the clone stamp tool to clone stamp in some more leaves or greenery into these open bright patches and then replicate it down here in the water as well. My eye kind of goes to here and then immediately jumps out the frame over here with the light parts of the image. It's almost more epic because this is probably just a park, or I shouldn't say this could, to me, this seems like a park where you've gone on a stroll, you're walking your dog, and you've had a nice composition. But if you color those light spaces in, it then could be in the middle of nowhere. You've traveled for 2 days through the dense forest or woodland to get there. And immediately, to me, it raises it and feels more epic and more interesting as a shot. Cool. But yeah, nice shot. Again, the main thing is getting that the next level of color in here. You're kind of in between seasons, which works to a certain extent. Maybe a bit of a vignette around this as well, just to again draw our eye towards the this part of the frame down here. Cool. Couple of questions. David asks, is it possible to make the images larger? Nope, not really. Maybe in Photoshop, I'm kind of zooming in so I can see the entire image. Maybe you want me to pull it forward when I'm in Photoshop. I can certainly do that if that's going to help you kind of see the images on your end. And yep, a couple of other messages here, which we'll get to as we run through some images. We'll do another 20 minutes or so, and then we'll wrap things up. So I just want to crack on. Okay. What was the podcast? Oh, it's a bunch of dudes. One of them's from the UK. He was Landscape Photography Podcast. I was listening to it the other day. And they're on about this place. This is probably 2.5 hours from where I live, and I've wanted to go here for ages. I've just never got off my house and got to it. By the time I could go to here, I could be in the Lake District, and I love the Lake District. So that's why I've not been up and done not done any shooting in Northumberland. But yeah, and I've also heard from numerous people that these rocks are absolutely lethal to be stepping on. But yeah, you've got amazing conditions here. I think the issue you've got, if I was to be critical, is your composition. There's the potential for like this water here, if you were stood, or this pooled water here, if you were stood, 2 or 3 meters over to your left, maybe that's your foreground and it's reflecting the sky. Because what we've got here is quite a lot of just dark stones and a big dark patch there, and then some random grass that we're obviously not that interested in. In fact, this almost gets in the way of the castle and the land in the background there. So it's not a bad image by any stretch of the imagination. It's a lovely image. But again, if we're being critical, I'd be moving over there so that perhaps this patch of pooled water is lighter. So that acts as my kind of foreground element, which then leads the eye around to the castle up there. Just this overlap here is just slightly annoying. and annoying from the perspective of, I think if you just moved around a little bit more, you would have got like a 9 out of 10 shot, whereas this is like a 6, 7 out of 10 because of the conditions are so good. Looks like you've done long exposure. You got some smoothing of the movement of the water here, which is nice. You got the streaking of the clouds and this reflection from the kind of rising sun in the sky. There you go, composite of 5 images to get the focus stack, which is good. And yeah, excuse me. I need to get my spacebar set up to pause the mic for any sneezes in the future. But I'm just seeing if there's any other comments here. So Alejandro has similarly pointed out there's just a little bit too many rocks in the foreground. Yep, I think you either needed to be slightly higher, pointed down to stretch out the foreground and move over to the left, or just found a more interesting 1 or 2 rocks that become like a major foreground that then everything else in the background of. But banging conditions. And if these are as slippery as everyone kind of talks about, then you've done a good job getting down towards them. Because sometimes you've got to take into account, especially with landscape shot and wildlife and sports, everything else, I guess. But just getting to the location is half the battle, especially in conditions like this. I don't know if this is sunrise or sunset. But either way, getting there in dark conditions as the sun rises, or get out of here once the sun has set, it'll be a bit of a nightmare. But yeah, nice one, Andy. Appreciate you, mate. Okay, here we have a classic case of thing in front of thing. A thing being in front of a thing typically does not make a great photo. So Jess, I'm going to be harsh on you here. I'm going to give you some. I'm going to be cruel to be kind. This is a pigeon on a canal, neither of which are particularly interesting. A pigeon doing something interesting, a canal that has interesting boats. We're getting closer. But as it is, this is we could get into the composition. I would definitely have got lower down. From a low down perspective, so you got less. You'd have less water in the frame. The bird would have taken up more of the. You like this right now. The bird would have took up more of the image down there. I think horizon is wonky as well. So I don't mean to be horrible, Jess. I'm sure I'm sure you probably appreciate the feedback here. But that's what I'd be looking for. We want something interesting in front of something interesting. Interesting in front of something interesting. Then we need to simplify further and find just the one thing that is interesting. It's a pigeon that's just stolen a chip from someone and the person's screaming. Cliche, and there's probably a million photos like that, but interesting nevertheless. That's what we want to be aiming for. So Jess, keep going. Post as many photos you like. I will review and give you as much feedback as you like in the Photography Explained photo review club. But this one on this occasion is not it. Right. Cool. So here we have Brian. Similarly with some of the other photos, having a big light patch in the background, my eye comes up. I like the fact that some of this is in focus, out of focus. There's nice textures, but my eye just immediately shoots out to that side of the frame. I probably want a little bit more depth of field on this because, again, this getting blurry here. This is still part of the main subject of the image, and it's a little bit frustrating to my eye that I can't. Comment here. You're right. It is a show. You can tell I'm not a wildlife photographer, or particularly bright. One and the same. But yeah, the subject here, I want this to be in focus, just so my eye goes all the way up the subject, and then maybe it bounces around. But if you could have just moved to your left and pivoted around the subject here, then you probably could have got more of this in the background. More of this, the seedlings in the background, and so you would have blocked off that bright patch. So that's just something to think about here. Let's look at some of Isaac's feedback that he left on the image. Is there a story to tell? If so, what? For an image like this, I'm not sure there needs to be a story. This could just be a interesting series of shapes, potentially. If there's no story, what do you want the viewer to see? There we go. Symmetry, rich texture, colors. I think the shape here is the interesting part of the photo. What is the eye drawn to in the photo? What are the distractions? For me, the distractions in this top left-hand corner. So yeah, Isaac, good feedback. Very similar to how I just outlined it then. But yeah, Brian, few things to tweak there potentially. Maybe you've got a, well, not maybe, you've got a bunch of room here for the color in the image as well, because it's very muted and green leaning in this image. You could probably color bounce this slightly differently and have everything pop a little bit more, which again can be a stylistic choice as opposed to the reality that you saw in front of you. Cool. Stephen, obviously tremendous location. I think the issue you've got here is the weather, if I'm being very blunt. You've tried to add some foreground interest, which is cool. And obviously, I'd say obviously there probably wasn't much going on in the foreground, I imagine, that we could have used to lead our eyes up to, is it Mount Vesuvius, potentially? Am I being dim again? I think I'm being dim. The mountain, if anyone's watching this in the comments, you can share what mountain it is. My brain is, again, of a 6-month-old baby, is getting more and more mushy as the days go on. But the main issue is just the sky here, which you're not always in control of. It looks like this is a sunrise or sunset because you've got the light on the side of the image, the sides of the mountain up here. But you need some clouds, you need something just to kind of finish this off. But it's a lovely location, and yeah, I think you've done a good job. Just being in these kind of places is half the battle. So that's cool, Stephen. Appreciate you, mate. All right, we have Benzel. Benzel Hemstock. I actually quite like this image, right? The main reason I like this image, I think this is absolutely something you should look for when you're photographing people. And this is probably leaned into my personality as well, right? This lady on the left is looking in completely the wrong direction whilst trying her hardest to pose, which to me is hilarious. You got these two. This dude's pointing up, obviously pretending there's something going on in the sky. This lady is like, "Oh wow, yes, that's incredible." This lady's looking in completely the wrong direction over there. Right, so let's pull this into Photoshop. I would edit this slightly differently, but again, this is a stylistic choice as opposed to right or wrong here. So the colors are very muted. Cool, David, I hear what you're saying. So maybe I edit the photos whilst they're like that, a little bit bigger, right? That's probably what you're after. So we can saturate. Now you might have desaturated this purposefully so it looks like film stock from back to be slightly more period correct. But for me, I think probably a little bit blown out in the highlights and the faces as well there. Pull the whites down just slightly. Cool. I'm no expert at portraits or anything like that, but for me, I always want to expose for people's faces, and their faces look slightly. There we go. That to me is a stronger image now than previous. If you wanted to make it less like a documentary image, which is what it is, it's documenting a moment of time that has been what's the word? Kind of a moment in time that has been recreated. Then you probably wouldn't want to vignette it. But I want them to pop out. I want them to stand out a little bit. Again, the lens blur might be a feature here just to make them pop a little bit. You've got nice rim lighting around these folks as well. So that's way too much lens blur there. Just a subtle amount. Just smaller than that even. That's what I'd be looking with the image. Probably a tiny crop on that side. Just to suck the viewer towards the top of the frame. We don't need the bit at the bottom of the frame is unimportant. We want the viewer to look at these two pointing up, and then probably at a second glance see this this lovely lady shooting her eyes and her attention off to the completely wrong direction. So yeah, that's how I look at editing it. But cool photo. Slightly different for the group as well. There's not many kind of posed photos or kind of studio images. It tends to be mainly wildlife and landscape for one reason or another. Cool. Right, we'll plod on for another 7 minutes or so. We'll go to the hour. But yeah, let's take a look at this image. Sarith. Problem here is, one, I would have just waited 5 seconds for these people to be slightly further up so they're not getting cut off by your foreground at the bottom of the image down here. Other than that, this is not being condescending, but this is a question that I like to ask myself when I'm doing photography. What is the point? What are we trying to show here? If we're trying to show these people walking across this reservoir dam, then maybe we want the people to stand out more in the image, in which case we want them in, potentially in this case where you framed it up, in like the rule of thirds, like up here. And we certainly don't want them cropped up by the foreground. I think the main issue is it's just a shot taken at the middle of the day, so everything's quite flat. You can tell it's the middle of the day because you've got these shadows pointing directly down from the top of these tresses at the top of the dam. Really what you want is the light coming in, hopefully from this right-hand side, and the light coming in and then our eye being brought round to these people and cropping out some of the left-hand side here. But it's a cool location. There's a couple of thoughts for you. If you were to reshoot this, I would shoot it during either sunrise or sunset, wherever hopefully obviously we can't position the dam where we'd like it, but so hopefully there would be the sun on the right hand side of the frame here. We want the sun coming in, shooting across, and then some people in the middle of the dam there. I think that's how we would reframe that one. Okay, here we have Andre. There's some weird out of focus background blur going on in this image. Not really, it's really busy. It's almost like there's some kind of filter on the lens. And you see this haloing around the fungi, the mushroom. Oh, there we go. So a vintage lens. So this might be purposeful, which is far too fancy for me because I have little taste, and you've probably done exactly what you wanted to do in this image, and I'm here criticizing you because it looks a bit messy in the background. But fine. You probably get away with a little bit of a crop on this side. Change the aspect ratio potentially rather than this is a 3:2 or 4:3. Just chop a little bit off the side, so you don't lose any of the top or the bottom of the frame. Other than that, that's what I'd be looking to do. It just seems like to my eye, there's just a little bit too much space on that right hand side, and maybe I'd want a little bit more space on the top, just a tiny little bit. But it's a cool photo, and this is why people have interesting lenses. Something that should probably do on the YouTube channel, Photography Explained YouTube channel, is probably a video on. That's almost a title. We should probably do this video. Why bad lenses are good. I should make a note of that. I'll make a mental note. So we'll go along the lines of that. Because people want character in the lenses. I think everyone goes through, we did a video on this recently, everyone goes through this chart, right? The 3 stages of photography where they want to go out and do photography, which is great, fantastic. People get motivated, learning lots, and so their confidence increases very quickly. Then they want razor sharp photos. And we've got a very cheap training over at photographyexplained.com. I think it's like $30 or so, which tells you exactly how to get razor sharp photos every single time, no matter what camera or lens you're using. And then people go from there and go, okay, well, I can take sharp photos of stuff. Now I want to take interesting photos of interesting things. And again, an interesting lens with obvious imperfections, probably elevates this image the more I look at it and makes it more interesting than what it would have been otherwise if you, for example, you'd use that new Sony macro lens that's just come out that's apparently just absolutely perfect. This probably would have been a less interesting image. So there we go, Andre. Andre, I think it is your pronunciation. You've brought me around with your classic Konica Hex Anon AR 50mm lens. Cool. But yeah, we should definitely do a video just for my own education on why bad lenses are great or something like that. Cool. Here we have Eugene. Eugene, you post regularly in the group, and I've seen your feedback as well, so I appreciate you, mate. This is lovely. This right. I think we can darken some of the image here. There's immediately I don't like this light looks artificial there. But this photo called The Exit was selected by the jury among top 50 in Swiss photo competition and will be displayed in an art gallery. Good for you, man. So who am I to give feedback on an image that is going to go in a gallery? But I'll do it anyway. This part of the image here, it just seems a little bit too bright to me. It looks a bit artificial. Or this part of the image here is too dark. I would balance out those two. I'd perhaps crop out some of the sky slightly. I don't think you need all this foreground here either. In fact, we're just going to throw it into Photoshop. Just have a quick gander at this. This could be a good example of because obviously what you've done is you've put a terrible watermark on here is the first thing you've done, but you want the eye to be led in from here, and you've probably brightened this part of the image, but it just to me looks unrealistic. So two things I would consider is, and again this is a bit on the nose and obvious, but to me this is like a scene from a James Bond film. And I want to see James Bond like escaping, right? So maybe I'd be looking at something more like that to remove that little bit of blandness from the sky, and these clouds again acted as a leading line towards this part of the photo. And I just do a radial gradient around here. Probably just pull that down. It's only subtle, but that to me, hopefully you can see that on the live stream. That to me just takes the edge off, and this bit is a bit dark up here. Because it doesn't look like we've got strong light. There's no clouds that would be causing the light to be particularly strong here. Again, only subtle. But that to me makes the image look a lot more realistic. And if you wanted, you'd probably want to increase a bit more light around this element part of the image here. So again, we're sucked in by the corner. We come to this character. Wonder if this is posed. Be interested to know, Eugene, if this is one of your mates who's just run up there to take the shot. But I quite like the fact that they're not centered in this gap either. It gives it some momentum, some direction. It looks like they're trying to escape. And I said, looks like something out of a Daniel Craig James Bond film. And he's got his phone. He's just about to bring in the helicopter or something. So there's just two sorts of changes. I'd probably even darken that bit in this foreground, midground a little bit more as well. But again, who am I to say anything if you've just won an award? So congrats. Okay, a few more and then we'll wrap things up because we're on the hour. So Madjay, again, I apologize for butchering everyone's names. I think Mark is perfect here. You want this crane to be in the gap. You've obviously got great conditions. You've got hopefully some storm clouds here. You've darkened the heck out of this, which is fine, but I would consider making the gradient of this cloud a bit softer because you can see where the cloud probably looks and then where you put a linear gradient on it. I just want to see what this is. And it's quite frustrating that I can't see it. So if you could have got lower, as Mark has suggested down there, perfect. You get the crane in the middle of the frame. Otherwise, if you're going down this route, I'd be cropping out this right-hand side and making it a more, because there's nothing here, right? There's no need for this part of the image to exist. I'd be cropping that out and I'd be making it more of just an interesting shape as opposed to my eye can tell it's a crane here. And so my eye's looking for where the rest of the crane is. Cool. All right, we'll wrap things up with this one from the main man, Neville. Neville says, not sure about this image. However, this is my first considered composition of a landscape. Thoughts and tips would be helpful. Okay, we'll pull it into Photoshop and we'll wrap up with this. But you're doing a fine job, Neville, if this is your first landscape composition. So the first thing is your colors are way off. Could be a stylistic choice, which is fine. As we just quickly go about this, probably more on the, you see the difference there, that get rid of Smart Magenta. Sky looks a bit off there. But other than that, you're a bit heavy on this side. You almost need a little bit, if we try a kind of a generative expander. Oops, I always get those two the wrong way around. Content aware fill. Just we've got a bit more room on that side of the hill to fall out. And then something we've got to be careful of, as you can see here, is this tree on the edge of the frame. It's just a bit of clutter. It's not really doing anything for us. Similarly with this, we've invented a bit of space on this side. But that's probably more what we'd be looking at. From a composition perspective, you've got a nice soft cloud, which is nice. Let me just see the original. So here, I think you're a little bit too close to the edge with this tree and too close to the edge with the trees up there. So now we've got a little bit more space. I don't know if I'd save the colors within Lightroom then, within Camera Raw, because the colors still look off. And there's a little bit too bright on this part of the image here. That looks a little bit unrealistic. But other than that, you've got some separation between this tree, you've got this tree, you've got these lines leading in. I think that is a half decent effort at a first shot of landscape photography. Again, the only thing I would encourage you to consider moving forward is watch the edges of your frame. And I think that's really obvious in this particular instance. Just a little bit more space either side, and it just elevates the shot. It makes it look more purposeful, is probably the word to describe it. But with that, Neville, I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone watching this, whether it's live or watching it later. If you want to leave your photos for review, just head over to the Photography Explained Photo Review Club. There's probably a link to it below this video. If you want to kind of post your content there, you can see all the images that are being posted. Oh, it's such a shame, Sue. I feel so bad for you. This is so close to being an absolute class shot. But yeah, maybe next time. And just a final plug, if you enjoy the way I edit photos, if you want to edit photos in a similar way, here you can see a photo that I've edited up in North Wales, or this one is in Laforton. And we've got a training, which again, you can find over at photographyexplained.com or in the link below this video, where I will show you how I edit photos very quickly in just a few handful of steps. And so an image, an image like this one, you can edit an image like this in 3-4 minutes. And if you're doing landscape photography, this could very well be useful for you. So with that, I love you and leave you all, and I'll speak to you on next week.